So if we pick up on this idea of the question, why is it so hard for larger companies to remain innovative? It's those paradox or that paradox that we're going to delve or deal with in this video segment. So I actually will have this video linked to onto D2L. This is a video I've been using for several years. It's a talk by Marissa Meyer, who at that time was with Google, and as many of you, or hopefully all of you are now aware, she's currently the CEO of Yahoo. And this was her talk on the top 9 things, or the top 9 list for innovation at Google. I'm getting a little tongue-tied. So I want you to watch that video, but as you watch it, I want you to ask yourself this question. Is this principle that Ms. Mayer is talking about universal, or is there some context about it that makes it applicable to Google, but perhaps not everybody else? We'll talk about this some in class, and I'm going to give you some updates on some other things Google has learned about innovation, which is to say some of their principles they aren't abiding to any longer. The first paradox of innovation, though, is when do successful companies kill their own stars? So you see up here the stock trace of the Eastman Kodak Company. So you're going to look at the downfall in the stock price, and everyone's going to say, how could Eastman Kodak not have seen the rise of digital photography? Of course, they had to see that coming. And you know what their answer is? We did. We just didn't see it coming quite as quickly as that. And they had this tremendous investment in a very profitable business in web film. Do they want to be the ones to kill it? Do they want to be the ones leading the charge saying, oh, you don't need film, we can all go digital? That's hard for a company to do. Not impossible, but hard for a company to do. And so that is the number one, or not the number one, a leading cause of sclerosis or a lack of innovation in companies. They want to get a return on their prior investments, and because of that, they want to let their winners run for a long time. Here's paradox number 2. And this is going to be contrary to a lot of what you have heard throughout your MBA career. The problem with listening to your current customers is that they will tend to talk you into only incremental innovations. Customers rarely see the need for radical innovations because they can't envision it. So at the very same time your customer's saying, we would buy it if you would do this and this and this and this and this, and they will, then somebody comes out of the blue, and destroys your whole business because it's a whole new world. You can bet that nobody was going to the mom and pop travel agents around town, and there used to be many of them in cities, saying, you know what we want to be able to do? We want to be able to make our own reservations online, because they couldn't conceive of online because online didn't exist, and they didn't feel like they were competent, even though, as we now know, they are. And then you got the other end of the extreme, which is, if you've been innovative, can you reap the benefits of that innovation for long enough to make it worthwhile, to make the cost of the innovation worthwhile? And this gets into that first mover, second mover debate that we have earlier in the semester. And so that's part of the dilemma. Can we make enough money out of this where it's logical for us to try to go first? Now, let me take a brief time out and talk about the design school of innovation. Right now, if you've been reading much of the business press, you read a lot about the design school. And those of you that have had me for the graduate entrepreneurship class, I talked about IDEO in a very famous innovation studio that uses this design school. A lot of the design school in part talks about the elegance of design. In that sense, that would be Apple. But the other part of the design school says you really need to be very anthropological. Well, you need to be an anthropologist. I can't say that word. In that you need to watch users how they use the product in their environment. And by watching users in their environment, you're going to see how to innovate. That will probably keep you in the incremental innovation path, but sometimes it will allow you to be fairly transformative when you realize people don't use this product at all like we thought, and you can be very radical in what you do. More bullet points. How much failure can your company afford? The standard mantra about failure is you need to fail fast and fail cheaply. Okay, that makes sense, so that you don't put a lot of investment into something before you figure out it ain't going to work. That isn't always easy to do, though. Right now, we're watching Boeing go through some more teething pains with the 787 and its battery. Well, you know what? That's a pretty big failure because that airplane's been grounded for almost 2 months. But does that mean that they shouldn't do the lithium-ion batteries? The book is still out on that. And then, can you fully embrace this culture of failure? Oh, failing's good, failing's good. And if you read right now the business press, that's one of the mantras. Failing's good, failing's good. Okay, but nobody goes to a football coach at the end of the season. Wow, you were 0-16. You failed a lot. Congratulations, you're a great coach. There's some measure of success you have to keep your business afloat. What is that? And how do you decide how much you can afford to fail? Part of that, and I'll talk about this more in the wrap-up, you have to be good at learning from failure. In other words, you don't want to have a failure where you lost a lot of money and you didn't learn anything. How do I know if I'm spending too much or too little on R&D? That's a hard question. Some companies like to metric it in terms of, for example, how many patents am I generating? That's a pretty tough one because not all patents have commercial value. Probably some of the most successful metric I've seen is companies will say how much of our revenue, we want to generate X amount of our revenue by products that are 3 years old or younger. Again, though, that invites you to launch out a lot of incremental innovation so you can say, well, this is a new brand of toothpaste. Oh, it's a new toothpaste. Oh, it's a new toothpaste, when it's basically the same toothpaste all along. Here's the curious part, though. More R&D isn't guaranteed to be better. If you look at the smartphone industry, we looked at the demise of Research in Motion earlier. Every year, they were outspending Apple in R&D. Didn't do them any good, now did it? The next bullet is a really tricky one, and that is, who's more important to innovation? Is it the technical skills that allow people to really push the frontiers, and obviously here we'd be talking about more of the technical innovations, or is it the soft skills that have you getting along with people? And for example, this was something that made Marissa Mayer so successful at Google. She was technically very capable. She was also, at least for an engineering company full of a lot of techie geeks, she was a really great people person. And so you want that blend, but let's face it, it's not easy to find that in a lot of people. Okay? Next, same thing. What am I looking for? Experience or youthful exuberance? One of the research findings is it usually is good if you mix both. And so you'll hear a lot of venture capitalists say, I like to see teams with a few gray hairs, and I would take offense at that, but I don't have a lot of hair anymore. A few gray hairs and some youth. They don't want all youth, they don't want all gray hairs. So they're looking for that blend. The next bullet is something that it probably is one of the real issues with established companies, and that is, what do I prize? The ability to come up with new stuff or the ability to execute it? Often there's a grave tension between those two sides. The innovators are seen as the people who have the foosball tables and get to come in at weird hours and just play around, and the execution guys are seen as, you know, these operational pocket protector kind of engineers that just make stuff happen really cheaply and and get mad at you when you want to put in anything new. It takes both. I told you Apple, part of the genius of Apple was the product skill of Steve Jobs, but the execution skills of Tim Cook. And so now with Steve Jobs passed away, the question is going to be, can the great execution skills of Tim Cook be augmented by some product genius by someone other than the CEO in the company? And then how you incentivize them when it says, how do I keep them both happy? This is a tricky part on the incentives. One of the things that tends to cause innovations to fail in big companies is the innovators come up with something pretty cool and they hand it to the executors, and the executors find a million reasons why it won't work. And it's because they come from two different cultures and there's a lot of enmity between these groups. The last bullet is this idea of having the innovation pyramid in the Rosabeth Moss Cantor article. And that is, I can't just shoot for home runs, nor can I just shoot to hit singles. So if I'm always relying on the big radical innovation, it probably isn't going to hit often enough for me to survive. And if I'm just doing incremental innovations, then I'm vulnerable to somebody coming in and hitting a home run and completely driving me out of the game. So usually it takes a balance of things in the pipeline, some incremental stuff as well as some pretty radical stuff. So failure, I've hinted on this. What you want to do is don't kill the people. In other words, don't make the idea of having led a failed attempt this permanent stigma that they can never overcome. However, it also takes kind of a elephant skin hide about you, because when you fail, you ought to dive into that failure and learn as much as you can. And trust me, having had airplanes crash in my units in the Air Force where they bring in outsiders to investigate this failure, that's not a very pleasant experience, but it's essential if you're going to learn. I've talked about the idea of having a funnel of ideas so that you have some home runs and you have some singles, and this idea of the real options approach where you invest only enough in each idea to get it to the next critical juncture. You don't make these big commitments. You try to incrementally push something along in terms of investment to validate that it's going to work. Putting the right leaders in charge to lead your innovation efforts is key, and then figuring out the compensation issues. These are things we now understand. This is the key, but it's still not easy to do. Some of the most innovative companies have this culture of collaboration, but still a lot of friendly competition. Google's known for having 2 or 3 teams working on the same problem. They'll get together and talk, but they also want their own idea to dominate. Demand innovation in all areas, and then also top up or bottom down. That's something we'll talk more about in class. Here's an interesting finding. In some cases, what makes companies innovative is their middle managers. That comes as a shock. And what it is, these people are skilled at championing. I kind of skipped over on the previous slide the idea of product champions, people that keep a product going when it doesn't necessarily have any initial support within the company. Well, middle managers are seen as those people that bridge to the senior leadership and also to some of the people lower in the organization who have the good ideas, and they keep things working. Here are the qualities of successfully innovative middle managers. They tend to have diverse experience. In other words, they know a lot about a lot of things, and they have social capital in that they know a lot of people in the company. This is an interesting one for me because it defies the stereotype. In some companies, they found that accountants were some of the most innovative people, and you all know that goes against the stereotype. And the reason I think it is because they would be put on audits early in their career where they would meet a lot of people across the company and be exposed to a lot of different elements in the company. They're confident. They have to have some courage to, I don't want to say buck the system, but maneuver inside the system. What they're doing isn't not allowed, but neither is it authorized. They tend to be action-oriented, have an entrepreneurial mind stuff. In my mind, entrepreneurs are people who make stuff happen. So these are people that are good at that. They're good at the real options approach, which means they're good at keeping projects alive by feeding small budget streams and keeping the worthy ones alive and then cutting off the funding streams to the ones that don't get done. They tend to be close to people, especially close to the customer. They have a very good eye for what problem they're solving and how that problem solution will resonate with the customer. And they tend to be pragmatic. They are not ideological people. They just do what it takes to get it done. Think about that for a second. Can that describe you in 5 or 10 years? These are the people that generate a lot of value for companies. These are the folks that teach the dinosaurs how to dance or make the dinosaurs dance. And I'm going to suggest to you that it's this skill set that you want to embody so that you can move forward. So the fact that innovation is desirable is obvious. The fact that it's hard for established companies is almost as obvious. So we've spent a lot of this section talking about how do companies learn to become more innovative. And you can see off the slide the things that you have to manage to do that successfully. I look forward to reading your STs. Let me tell you up front that this ST is probably the most challenging because I want you to dwell on, excuse me, what it is about that company that makes them innovative. Don't just tell me, oh, this company is innovative because they launched this new product or this startup has got this great product. Okay, there's evidence that they're innovative, but you haven't told me why they're innovative. What is it about their practices, policies, the way they do business that allows them to innovate when so many other companies don't seem to be able to do so? Look forward to our conversation in class.